Good afternoon, all. Today from IAPWC Goa, I welcome you all to today's webinar that is Environmental Physiotherapy, a very new concept in the world of physiotherapy. So today's moderator is going to be Dr. Palasha and will be held by Dr. Rashmi. The vote of thanks is going to be Dr. Lavi. We have with us today Dr. Filip, who is here for another interesting and interactive session with us regarding this new topic. So without any delay, I would like to request Dr. Palasha to please start off.
Thank you, Dr. Smarnika. A very good afternoon and morning to all. Today, I welcome you to a webinar focusing on a new upcoming webinar series on environmental physiotherapy organized by IIP Women's Cell Goa, India. Environmental physiotherapy is a new field of exploration in physiotherapy, exploring and building on the manifold relationships between human health and function, the natural environment of our planet, and physiotherapy. Building on the fundamental insight that the human health depends on our planetary environment, EPT aims to advance environmental awareness and responsibility across physiotherapy research, practice, and education. With this, environmental physiotherapy seeks to support the global physiotherapy profession in making a meaningful contribution to present and future planetary health and support the transition to more sustainable futures. I, Palasha Sardesai, along with the entire Women's Cell Goa state team, are delighted to present to you our speaker today, Dr. Filip Maric, the founding chair of Environmental Physiotherapy Association. Dr. Filip is a physiotherapist with a clinical background in musculoskeletal and sports physiotherapy. His doctoral research focused on the ethical foundations of physiotherapy and sparked his interest in questions concerning the relationship between physiotherapy and our natural planetary environment. He is a founding member of Critical Physiotherapy Network and the founding and executive chair of Environmental Physiotherapy Association, the first international network of physiotherapy clinicians and students, academics, and professional representatives seeking to advance environmental awareness and responsibility in physiotherapy. Dr. Maric, you may please proceed.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you very much for the invitation to this webinar. It's really an honor and a pleasure to be here. And I'm so excited about the fact that environmental physiotherapy is increasingly making its rounds around the world, and with this webinar also is making a very significant entry into India. Although we already have quite a few members in our association from India, this I think is a meaningful step to continue advancing what we do in your country as well. I'm really, really excited about this opportunity. So what I will do is I will talk you a little bit through through my own story or history that led me to environmental physiotherapy. I will also talk to you a little bit about our association and about some of the projects that we're involved in or working on. I will do that because going through my own history as well as through sort of the association and our projects, particularly one major one, I think, is going to give you a bit of an overview of what we're thinking about. Somebody's writing there is a low voice. I'll try. Hopefully this is a little bit better. So I will, talking you through these points will just, I think, give you a little bit of an overview over what we're thinking about in terms of environmental physiotherapy, what it is, what it could be or can be in the future, and what we believe it should be also. So I'll start off with this. Like Dr. Palasha was already sharing, my doctoral research, I finished a couple of years ago now. And in my doctoral research, I was looking at the ethical foundations of physiotherapy. And something that I noticed there was that physiotherapy really is in most ways lacking a conception of kind of something like an environmental responsibility in our professional ethics. It's the environment is just not factored in. Maybe to some extent we understand that there is a work environment and that has or that people have working environments, and that's something, that has something to do with our work. But it's almost like the natural environment is excluded from, our ethics, but I would also say our thinking and working as a whole, or has been so far. So this is kind of where my interest started in this area. But after my doctorate studies, I wanted a little bit of a break from academic work. And I went back into clinical work and made a really, for myself, very significant experience there. I'm just going to ask if my voice is loud enough now. I hope that it is. If I'm not hearing anything else, I will just continue speaking this way. So when I went back into clinical practice, there was something interesting I experienced, which is that I came across a pretty large number of clinics. At the time, this was in New Zealand, where I was doing my postgraduate studies, both my master's and my PhD. So I experienced a large number of clinics where the treatment rooms that physiotherapists were working in had basically no access to direct sunlight or to natural light. There was no windows in the rooms, just a kind of a door that also blocks out light. And I found this really, really disturbing, because for me, it underscored how far we've gone in physiotherapy to exclude the natural environment of our world from our rooms, from our work, basically. So I started researching around that a little bit, and I found out that in the same year that I came across that, the WHO also it recognized working underground or doing night shift work, which basically both of it means working without access to natural light, on the list of carcinogens. So it's been recognized as carcinogenic. And I thought that was really quite significant, because if myself and my colleagues are working in rooms that have no access to natural light, that's a real problem. It's a problem to our own health. And of course, our own health also plays a role in our work. But at the same time, I was thinking it was really, in some ways, paradox that we would invite patients with different ailments into our clinics, and into these kinds of clinics where the treatment rooms have no windows, and people in New Zealand, to make an example, are coming into a clinic from a very beautiful sort of natural outdoors environment, and then we bring them into these rooms that have no natural light, and there's all white walls and all of this kind of clinical look, and we expect people to get better in that, which I found just nearly absurd. So I continued researching along those lines, and I found out that actually there is growing research in this direction in many other healthcare professions. It's just not that widespread yet, or that kind of, it's not very well known in physiotherapy so far. So there is, for example, research that, being in, let's say, kind of clean-ish or well-preserved or something like that, natural environments, so natural environments that are not fully degraded, is actually good for people's health. And there's indication that it's good for people's mental health, but also for their physical health directly. And of course, yes, we're a physical rehabilitation profession, so the physical aspect is quite important. But we know these days that mental health is really important to physical health as well. And so there are lots of connections there. So this was, for me, putting together this thing that I found the environment missing in ethics, and I found the environment missing in clinical spaces. For me, kind of put those things together, and that's what really sort of sparked my interest to try and do something more in this direction, and really try and do something at the level of our profession internationally. So this is how, in the middle of last year, roughly, my colleague, Professor David Nichols, and I wrote an editorial together that was published, and where we're calling for essentially more environmental awareness and responsibility in physiotherapy. And with with the publication of that editorial, we also launched the Environmental Physiotherapy Association. So we've been running a little bit over a year now, and the association has over 300 members from virtually every continent around the world. There's no continent that's missing, and we have physiotherapists from all levels, just like Dr. Palasha was saying in the introduction. So we have clinicians, students, academics at all levels, professional representatives from some of the national physiotherapy associations, and some international ones as well. And it's really meaningful. And we're continuing, or we've begun, I would say, to explore some of the really many contact points between physiotherapy, health, and environment. I think, the point is this, and I will make the point again, hopefully at the end, if I remember. Somehow, as a result of our history in physiotherapy, we've kept the environment outside of our thinking and outside of our doing, when the reality of it is, it's actually everywhere. And in some ways, I should say that there is no physiotherapy that's not environmental. The environment is implicated in virtually everything we do. The task at the moment is to make that a little bit more explicit, or actually probably a lot more explicit, to understand those links better, and also to act on them. So that's, hopefully something that I'll repeat again later, because I think it's a very important point at this point in our profession. And I'll talk you through some of the links by talking through some project and such issues. So basically, if I just sort of give you an overview of the different topics or things that people are thinking about so far in the context of the association, is we've got I think about 40 blog posts published now within this year by around 20 different contributors. And people have written blog posts on, the philosophical foundations and ethics. That would, be me and my colleague, Professor David Nichols, in regards to how our ethics and our philosophical foundations of our profession do relate and could relate more to environmental issues. We've written about this thing that's called green space exposure. So this is how being exposed to well, let's say healthy outdoors is also good for human health. We've written about, we've had two chronic pain patients contribute blog posts on how they feel that the environment and getting outside into healthy environments has also been a contribution to their health. So there is a good link there too. We've had colleagues from some clinics that are working on making their clinics more environmentally sustainable, so producing less waste and having a kind of a smaller environmental footprint, if you will. So this is also an aspect of our work. And of course, there's also links to the Sustainable Development Goals that very much sort of are around environmental, social, and then economic sustainability, and bringing all of that together in a good way. We're also working with some projects, actually, in the UK, but also in South Africa, where we're trying to help allied healthcare professionals, so not just physiotherapists, but also some of our colleagues in other professions, to look at exactly, how can we make our practices environmentally sustainable? And this is important because actually what we know these days is that healthcare, as a profession or as a group of professions and as a service internationally, has a really significant carbon footprint and environmental footprint. That means there's a lot of greenhouse gas emissions that we contribute as healthcare professions around the world. And actually a report that came out last year, it really highlighted that if you put the healthcare professions internationally together and consider them a country, we would be the 5th most emitting country in the world in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, which is a really significant number, of course. So we have a lot of, and there's more that healthcare professions or kind of healthcare systems contribute in terms of waste, and there is some chemical pollution and so forth. So the aspect of making what we do more environmentally sustainable is definitely one very important aspect of environmental physiotherapy also. I want to say something else, going back to this bigger claim that I made, that there is really no physiotherapy that's not environmental. This is underscored by one important thing. We need to understand, I think, at the foundation, that there is basically no health without everything that our natural environment of this planet that we live on provides. So humans cannot exist or thrive and survive, let alone be healthy, if it's not for the food that we can eat here, the natural food that our planet provides, the air we can breathe, the water we can drink, and so many more things. There is a concept that's related here that comes from, just looking it up very briefly, it comes from the IPBS, that's, let me get this right, the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, and it's called Nature's Contribution to People. And I think it's something that's really important to understand, because again, our planetary environment is fundamental to human health. There's no such thing as human health without a healthy or conducive natural environment. Now, the problem with that is, of course, that we know also that these days we have a lot of environmental problems in our world. There's really significant environmental issues that are ultimately putting present and future health at significant risk and having significant health impacts. So these environmental issues include loss of biodiversity, climate change, of course, the pollution of air, water, and soil, and this can be through particulate matter or through plastic pollution or chemical pollution and different aspects like that. We also know that we have significant changes of land cover, so we're losing forests around the world at astonishing rates, and that's, or worrying rates, I should say, and that's really again, that's also contributing to biodiversity loss and climate change, and it all kind of plays into each other. The list goes on with these environmental issues, and I don't want to sort of just rattle off a list like this too much, but suffice to say that good health depends on our natural planetary environment. Currently, this natural planetary environment is undergoing dramatic changes, negative changes. It's degrading very rapidly. And it's doing so due to very specific human action also. And the result of that is that we're seeing increasing health impacts from this, both directly and indirectly from these environmental changes. So we're seeing already increasing numbers of, or increasing prevalence of non-communicable disease through a number of different mechanisms. Today's environmental problems are also contributing to malnutrition. They're also increasing the rate of infectious and vector-borne diseases. And there's a lot of physical and mental trauma and injury that's happening. For example, due to extreme weather events like floods or hurricanes and such. And also through climate migration, so where people, or environmental migration, if we want to broaden it, where essentially people have to flee or move away from the places they live in because those places are so environmentally degraded that they no longer can support human life and health in a good way. So it circles back again to this point. Our health depends on our environment. Our environment is currently undergoing dramatic negative changes, and that's impacting on health already of people today, but also of people in the future. It's really threatening that. So I'll just very briefly maybe share my screen and I will share precisely, hang on, this part here. There we go. So, where is it? Not sure it's working at the moment. Hang on, I will stop the share and just try that again. There we go. So you should be seeing my browser. I'm just showing you the front page of the Environmental Physiotherapy Association website. I've put the link in the chat box as well if you want to have a look at some more of those kind of issues and topics that we've covered so far. And like I said, we're involved in a number of different projects. And one of the biggest projects that we've kind of got off ground now is the Environmental Physiotherapy Agenda 2023. And I'll share this other screen here with you. Basically, the Environmental Physiotherapy Agenda 2023 is two things. Number one, and I'll scroll on here. It's a global call to action that's calling physiotherapy education institutions around the world to begin to just make a start in integrating some of these questions and topics around the relationship between health and physiotherapy and the environment into their curricula, so that future generations can be a little bit more prepared and understand these relationships more and understand better how this is going to change their work, how it's going to be necessary for them to adapt to these new challenges, and what they can maybe do to contribute to the situation as a whole. So I won't go into too much details here, but it's a very open call to action where we want to include as many diverse approaches and ideas as possible for a very particular reason or a number of reasons. And one key one is that I think environmental issues, there are some global environmental issues, but of course we also have local contexts that we work in. And in those local contexts, some of the global environmental issues as well as the local environmental issues will be coming together in a very specific way and requiring very specific responses. And those need to be accounted for in future education as well. So this is why we're keeping this quite open, both in terms of content and methods. And we've given a few examples, and this is kind of another one that, in some places around the world, there's a really good argument to be made that if we are a profession that promotes physical activity, just one moment, please, that there might be a reason or an opportunity for us to try and promote active transport as an alternative to passive transport. So this means walking and cycling and maybe scootering or things like those, as opposed to driving a car, including, not as opposed to flying, that's different distances, but in some instances, there is good reason maybe to use active transport as an alternative and to promote that as a physiotherapist, if it's good for that particular patient that you're seeing. And that to understand that that can have benefits just for the patient's health on the back of physical activity, but actually also it can have co-benefits for some of the environmental problems that we're seeing. And so this is a really simple kind of thing and idea that we can also think about of, okay, that could also be part of environmental physiotherapy and understanding and building on these relationships between physiotherapy and the environment. There are lots more examples and explanation given in the agenda, and again, lots more reading, just like on our association website, but even as a standalone project. Now, I might just skip over this because it's detail around the agenda that we don't need now. The other part of the agenda, apart from being a call to action, it's also a collaborative proposal. So with all participating institutions, we've already begun to collect information on what's being integrated at different schools or what they're planning to integrate in terms of topics, what methods they will use, what challenges they come across. And we want to develop an open access database for environmental physiotherapy education so that more of us can get an idea and understand its really broad and open possibilities. So I will stop sharing this here and switch to another share one more time. And that's off my browser. So this is the web page of the Environmental Physiotherapy Agenda, and maybe Dr. Palasha could put in the URL of that into the chat box as well, just if you wanted to look it up later on. I'm really happy about the following. We have a lot of people that sign this agenda individually, and it's a really incredible mix of people from around the world that are supporting this agenda. We also have a range of really meaningful supporting organizations here already. It includes the Swedish and German and also New Zealand physiotherapy national associations. We have some international groups here. We have some student physiotherapy associations that are supporting this project. And what is very meaningful also, we have some supporters from the bigger world of planetary health, which is maybe this field, thinking about this field between human health and the environment in a broader sense across the healthcare professions. And so these are some of our supporters so far, and the list continues to grow. And I'm hoping that one day we can also add IAP to this list, and of course the Women's Cell. This really helps us sort of to make this, to spread this idea wider and to try and have a really positive impact on future planetary health, if you will, through physiotherapy or as the physiotherapy profession as well. So I'll just show you briefly this here. This is the list of currently 16 participating institutions. We have schools and universities from, again, a really widespread around the world already. We have Ireland, we have Germany, Netherlands, South Africa, Chile, Sweden, Greece, the UK and the USA and New Zealand and Australia on board, represented by different schools. And we're hoping again that many more will join, including, of course, many schools and universities from India as well as we go forward. So this is the current state with the agenda and everything we're doing there. And some of the ideas that we've put out there also via the agenda. This has been about half an hour or approaching half an hour of me talking. I'm going to come to an end now, and I really I'm hoping that we can have a lot of discussion and talk around some of these topics and maybe question and maybe have a few more ideas of what environmental physiotherapy could be. And that brings me to another really important sort of key point of mine. And it's this, like Dr. Smaranik and Dr. Palasha were saying in the beginning, environmental physiotherapy is a pretty new idea. I would say it's only been out there since a little over a year. I've personally been working on it for about, 2 to 3 years now, but it's very, very new still. It's new to me still as well. And I am still working on understanding all of its possible implications and understanding what are all these relationships between health and function and my physiotherapy patients and physiotherapy students and physiotherapy as a profession. And I'm still trying to find out what are all these different things and how it relates and so forth. And to be honest, it's basically too much for me alone. We're really, and too much for the association alone. I think we're really needing all hands on deck at the moment, and we're needing all hands on deck in this project and in the effort to understand what this field is and can be and should be in the future. And that's why I'm hoping that we'll have a lot of discussion around this and maybe raise some new ideas, because these kind of talking to others always helps me understand a little bit more. The basic premise again, and this is probably the third time I'm saying, is there is no physiotherapy that's not environmental. Saying environmental physiotherapy is just about making that more explicit, making it more clear, and more actively including that understanding into what we do, what we research, how we teach and what we teach, and so on. So if I was to think about, so what does this mean for physiotherapists in India today? I think it means something potentially really incredible. If I understand correctly, the IAP has now around 50,000 members. And there's a lot more physiotherapists in India that are not registered potentially. And if I'm to imagine what 50,000 people, if they do something, for example, if 50,000 physiotherapy professionals in one country, for example, help to produce less waste in the provision of their services, or help to improve some of the environmental issues that are kind of local to their specific context, that's incredible. Because sometimes in this whole field, we can feel like, oh my God, there's like such big things here at play, and how can I do something here, and how can I affect that? Well, in actual fact, well, if we band around a little bit together, and that's kind of what we're trying with the association also, 50,000 people potentially, I mean, can do incredible things. I want to believe, I have to believe, and I'm sure that that's the case. And I think something that, what does it mean, and for physios in India or for physios in some other country? I come from Germany originally, I live in New Zealand, I'm in Norway now. I think one of the important things is, okay, we have to understand some of the global environmental issues and related health problems and implications. But then we also, I think, there's something I'm thinking about a lot at the moment, is we have to understand what are our local environmental issues, what are the health impacts there on the patients that we may be seeing on a regular basis, and find out what are the most effective actions that we can take in order to change that. So if I'm to take another example also, this year the WHO recognized air pollution as the main driver of COPD around the world. I know that, like, if I'm not mistaken, air pollution is a significant problem in some areas of India, for example. And the question is going to be that if we recognize that link, what is the most effective thing that we can do in order to contribute to the good health of our current patients or future patients that will potentially have COPD or develop COPDs? Is it really to continue sort of that treatment in the clinic that we do to help them breathe better? I have no doubt that that continues to be important. But maybe there is also something more that we have to do and can do. Maybe there is something that we have to advocate for, changes in policies, for, I will say, nearly environmentalist issues, for social issues that, reduce kind of that burden that, is produced there. And maybe there is something also at the level of our personal lives that we can change in order to, I don't know, help with the issues. So there's many levels of where we can get active as environmental physiotherapists. That's environmentally aware and responsible physiotherapists. And I personally, I find that an exciting opportunity, an inspiring opportunity. It really sort of sparks my creativity, but it's also urgent. It's really necessary that we do this and get involved with this. And so on that note, that's why it's also so good to be here with you today and to share these ideas with a new group of physiotherapists, or new to me, because the more of us are exploring and thinking about this together, the better we can understand it, and the more efficient or meaningful our actions in this regard can become as we go forward. So thank you again. I'll leave it here, and I suppose we can move to questions and discussion.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Filip. We'll be asking you a few questions now. What were the difficulties you faced when you were setting up the association? And how did you promote more awareness about environmental physiotherapy?
I don't think there was too many. First of all, thank you, Dr. Rashmi. And I don't think there was too many difficulties in terms of setting up the association. It's just something that we felt was necessary, and something. We also felt that, okay, we need, in the world of physiotherapy, it's probably going to be important to us to have something in writing that we can use as a start, and this was our editorial. But really, it was just something we felt it was necessary and something we did, and I don't think there was any challenges as such. And in terms of promoting this idea, I think definitely we use social media. Of course, today that's used for everything, but we're also using normal sort of academic channels, I would say, which is publications. And we just had a new article come out 2 days ago, or a new kind of short communication come out on this topic yesterday, and there's a few other people also. It's increasingly we're building a kind of knowledge base or evidence base around this, and our members are contributing all of these different ideas and also sharing that on social media. And as we grow as an association, the topic grows, and it's very much like today. Somehow it seems that it's a bit like these dominoes. One thing, what invitation to to hold a workshop or a seminar with one group of people leads to another, and this is also how we are here today, and how we have another opportunity here today to just forward and advance these ideas. So yeah, no challenges as such. It's just going from one opportunity to the next, and it's kind of, I want to say, to use an environmental metaphor, it's growing quite organically, and I'm happy about that. It needs water a little bit every once in a while, and a little bit of fertilizer or something like that, something natural ideally, but it's just growing slowly as we continue working on it. Yeah.
Right. Next question, Doctor, would be, how do we integrate our environment in therapy sessions in an urban setting? Because there's a lot of pollution, there's not enough sunlight. How do we do that?
Yeah, I think this is a great question. Thank you for that as well. I think it must begin with recognizing that this is a challenge and that it is a problem, because this is, what I started with basically. So far in physiotherapy, we haven't actually recognized that this is a problem, and we haven't recognized that the way our cities are, or we have in some aspects of physiotherapy, for example, in the context of disability, there's been a lot of research and developments in kind of how do we improve access for disabled people, and it's kind of along those lines, really. We haven't understood that, or we haven't acknowledged fully in the physiotherapy profession that urban environments, the way that they currently often are not really conducive to the health of our patients and our health for that matter, and that this requires some kind of change. So I think it's like, it starts with recognition of the problem. And then once we recognize the problem, I think it's starting to play around with different possibilities of what can be done. I have to say, for me, in those clinics that I encountered where there was no natural light, I mean, I started off with something really simple, like putting a lot of plants into those rooms and putting pictures of the outdoors on the walls. And actually, when I did that, what was fascinating was that all of my patients would come in and they would comment on that almost right away. Or if not right away, then at some point throughout their first session already, they would say, oh, that's a beautiful picture of the outdoors, or oh, it's so nice you have all these plants, or something like that. People connect to those things. People, I think, actually inherently connect positively to natural environments and plants and animals and so on. And for me, that was a simple sort of first way of how I tried to do that. But I think there's some. I don't have all the answers and all the ideas. That's why I'm hoping that maybe somebody else can try and come up with an idea for this particular question. But I know that from my perspective, something that's interesting is also, how can physiotherapists in the future, for example, step outside of their clinic and do work in other areas that need working in order to contribute to good health? So for example, is there a way that we can, I don't know, contribute to urban design and so on? And I know that there's actually, I've just been in contact with some physios, or a physio that's working together with an architect, and they're exploring some of those links. And I know of many people that are also kind of interested in that space. So this is a very important thing, I think. One is we have to start by recognizing and really explicitly acknowledging that problem. And then there's, I think, different avenues for solutions.
Yes, thank you. So related to that question and answer, how can you start a sustainable practice at a clinical level in terms of it being environmental friendly? Like if somebody wants to open up a new clinic, what are the criteria that you have to follow?
We don't have such criteria in physiotherapy yet. There is some work being done in this space in other healthcare professions. So there is some movements around, or people around the world are working and doing significant work on making new hospitals really environmentally sustainable, for example. This is entire hospitals and not just one kind of clinic. And they're looking at where they're sourcing their energy from and how can they, not use carbon-based energy or kind of fossil fuel-based energy for their hospitals, but make sure that their energy comes from renewable sources. How can they have less single-use plastics in their hospitals and so forth? How can they minimize the waste that they're producing? So all of this is being researched quite heavily, and there's being changes made in a lot of other healthcare professions, and I would say on the hospital level to quite significant extent in many different places. So for example, in the UK, the National Healthcare System just released a report on how the UK NHS is planning to be net carbon zero. Let me check when NHS, not too long from now, actually. Well, so I believe the plan is to deliver a net zero health service. I'm going to say by 2030. I might be slightly off there. Or slightly too hopeful, I'm not sure, but it's something that can be looked up online. So all of these are possibilities. So I think with the physiotherapy clinic, there's going to be challenges because normally a physiotherapy clinic is in some kind of building that sources its energy from somewhere, and it's kind of at the building level that you have to change that aspect, for example. But some colleagues in Canada, for example, and also in New Zealand are exploring just having less, I don't know, using less paper, for example, and then going more digital. And there's ideas that that could be one of the ways to help. I know that also a simple thing, like, for example, in some waiting rooms, water is being offered to clients, and sometimes it's offered in plastic cups. And maybe there's a way not to use, especially not single-use plastic cups, but something else. I know in a clinic in New Zealand, they've moved to compostable cups and, just changing little things like that. I don't have the full answer. We don't have like a list of criteria yet that you can go and tick off, tick off, tick off. On the contrary, we actually need innovative potential from new clinic owners and existing clinic owners to give us ideas of how this can be done and what are the challenges along the way and so on. So there is some material out there on this, and I've tried to make some examples, but a lot of it is still also requires a lot of innovative potential.
Yes, thank you for that. The next question would be, how would we understand the relationship between health and environment, and how is it relevant to physiotherapy?
So I think, yeah, thank you. So I think this was the key point that I was trying to make, that the relationship between health and environment and physiotherapy, it's ubiquitous, it's everywhere. People could not walk into our clinics if it wasn't for our planetary environment and for some amount of its health, or it being conducive to human health and existence and so on. So the key is, I think, to understand that this relationship is just everywhere. But if we really need something sort of more dramatic or more specific, if you think, for example, people live in regions where there are extreme weather events of different sorts, I don't know, flooding, hurricanes, extreme temperatures, and so on. This has direct effects on people's physical health and function also. People get injured, their hearts, heart condition worsens if they have pre-existing one, or they develop heart conditions and so on. And these clients walk into our clinics, hopefully, or they are brought into our clinics, hopefully for us to help them. So there are these very direct relationships from these sort of very current and sort of big environmental issues that directly impact people's physical health and function, and we see those people in the clinic. So it's fine, we can continue, and we need to continue treating those people, but of course it's not a very efficient approach in terms of maybe preventing such future injuries, where it would be more important to address those the environmental issues that kind of bring those, contribute to those injuries in the first place. And then maybe also to go even one step further and think about, well, what's actually causing those environmental problems, and can we go there? Because I think as physios, we understand that we need to look for sort of the causes and not the symptoms. And always just sort of staying at that level is also maybe not always the most conducive thing or contributive thing to do. So yeah, it's understanding that it's everywhere and it's really basic to everything we do. And then there are also some direct things that, of course, you know, also deserve, or not deserve, but must be mentioned, actually. I hope that's kind of an answer to this question.
Yes, thank you. Is there any place that we can find the evidence-based literature or research work regarding environmental physiotherapy?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, just yesterday, I updated on the Environmental Physiotherapy website, association website, for example. And this is just one of the many places that you can find such things. But I'll share with you here again on my screen. Maybe let's do this. Share screen. So on the Environmental Physio Association website, we have a tab that's called Resources, and I've just updated this yesterday and made it a lot more well accessible and easy to search. We have here a pretty sort of, by now actually quite lengthy list of publications in this area that are from within the world of environmental physiotherapy or from within the world of physiotherapy. But we've also included other topics. So there's a lot of literature that we're listing here on planetary health and related fields like sustainable healthcare. Some of sort of the philosophical and sort of fundamental ideas related to it, how this could be introduced into education, lots of literature here on that. Also a really extensive list. There's a lot of material on the sustainable development goals and how these can be introduced into education and why and so forth. So around that evidence as well. And what I've also done here is, or what we've also done here is we've listed some pretty sort of key peer-reviewed journals that you can find on these topics. And also some relevant sort of international centers and networks and associations that are working in this broader space in healthcare. And what we also have here is a kind of resource submission form. So it means that if you find an article yourself that maybe we haven't listed, and of course we can't list everything, we want to list some ideas to get people started. But if you find something that you think is of particular interest and that we should feature, you could theoretically also submit it here. There's a similar list of things. So again, we have a long list or growing long list of publications from within physiotherapy already. What we also have is a similar list along these lines on the EPT agenda website. There's a lot of information, first of all, in the fundamental text and evidence and literature cited and so forth. And we also have a resource and reference page. And this one is a little bit more geared towards education because, of course, the project is about education. So there's a lot of material out there and you can find it going through our association website, I would say particularly. And then if you're interested in the education aspect, going through the agenda. I'll stop sharing here. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. The next question being asked is there are many people who are working in coal factories and chemical factories who face a lot of environmental issues. How can we help them in terms of environmental physiotherapy?
That's a great question, and I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but I feel like I'm doing a lot of the talking, and I want to invite, you know, is there maybe somebody who has an idea on this and would like to come forward, possibly the person that has asked the question or something along those lines? I think it's a great question. Yeah, it's one that calls for creativity for sure.
I think in the Indian setup, such areas, if we can use certain filters onto the windows and also mask while working, which has become a very much normal norm nowadays, I think that would really help. And regularly checking yourself in terms of lungs, like doing spirometry on a regular basis, is I think something which will give us a better idea about where we are and if that is impacting and how badly it is impacting. Because not only coal factories, I think it is also in certain parts of India we have a very high pollution because of industries. I think that's where we can start with. But there are window filters which, if not 100%, but definitely they will help in reduction of some amount of dust. Maybe if we are using like a AC environment, the dust will not be going so much in.
Very true. And we can also implement teaching them breathing exercises.
Yes.
So that will be a
Also, sometime I think the prone line, because it is more of a restrictive disease that happens. It's not an obstruction. So in restrictive diseases, more of inspiratory plus expiratory exercises. So inspiratory spirometry can be used for inspiratory muscle training, and expiratory muscle trainer is a separate device which can be used. But something as simple as blowing a balloon or whistling would also help for them to strengthen their muscles. And prone lying, so if we can give some exercises in that, or ask them that at least 10 minutes they should prone lie or something, I think that would help. That's just our view. I mean, anybody else can also tell or put on the chat box. I think that would help. Because I think for Dr. Philip, the environment there and the environment in India is very different. So for us to ask him questions of this environment, I don't think it's fair right now.
No, I think this is great, but it's almost exactly sort of the question that I have to ask back, because like for me actually,
Yes.
uh, I'm relatively new to Norway. I've only moved here 1 year ago, and like I said, this whole topic is very new. So it's actually one of my big interests at the moment is to understand much more sort of what are the environmental issues here in Norway, how do they relate to health locally, globally, and so forth. And I think
Yes.
some similar work needs to be done, of course, in India as well. You
Yes, so
need to
I think
understand.
you're on the right path where you are getting members from across the continents and countries, because I think in India every state wise the problem differs. So country wise it is going to be definitely something where different issues will be dealt with different people. So I think yes, having somebody from here to give their solutions to these problems, because these are all very unique experiences that not everybody would have. There might be coal mines in any country, but I think because of our population density in India, we are staying closer to these industrial areas. Whereas in most of the other countries, the industrial areas are pretty much far away from the cities, or at least where the people stay.
Yeah, I think it's great what you're saying, and I think I want to make one additional point is that I understand this is sort of the suggestions that you're making around the breathing exercises and so on, because that's kind of where our home has been for such a long time as physiotherapists, and kind of this rehabilitation space and what can I do for this individual client. But I think one of the things that environmental physiotherapy does as an idea, and that I really want to put forward, is it asks us, or it gives us the opportunity to think much bigger. So of course we know in the global context that somehow coal mines cannot be a thing of the future. And the question is there a possibility for us physiotherapists to, for example, leverage our, well, or use our political leverage? I mean, 50,000 physiotherapists, maybe more in one country, to say something about this coal mine. It's affecting people's health that work there. It's affecting people's health in the region and the country. It's contributing to climate change. It's not good for it to continue operating. We need to look for, I don't know, how do we help those people that work in the coal mines find a job in, for example, the renewable energies industry and some completely different. So how can we work on levels outside of the one that we're used to, which is the one-on-one therapist and patient level? I think that environmental physiotherapy invites us to think about such bigger things. in addition to what we normally think about as well. Yeah.
Yes.
Dr. Rahman would like to put in a point of energy conservation therapy may be helpful. That's his suggestion.
I'm not sure what that is, but I'm intrigued and it sounds interesting.
Yes. So it was very good answer by you. And now you can even think about, traveling to other places and looking at different environments. And environmental physiotherapy can be different in different countries and places. So you have to go out of your box now. Maybe something for you to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, I think that's exactly the point. It must be different in different places around the world, because if it's not that, it's actually not environmental. The environment is different in different places. So I think that's good. And traveling is an interesting topic, of course. On some level, it's always nice, even for us physiotherapists to travel around, or it has been nice to travel around and to share with each other and to meet and have all these conferences and so forth. But maybe that's not the solution for the future, where traveling is something that probably we need to reduce individually, but also as a profession. And some energy conservation is to be done there as well. And it would actually be quite therapeutic, probably. So yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much. That was a wonderful session and very interactive and informative, and something very new for all of us. And I would like Dr. Palasha to give the vote of thanks.
Can I just maybe one final comment, very briefly? So once again, thank you for your invitation. I really enjoyed this, and I hope we get together more often to talk about these things. And again, like we talked about also in how this all is specific to India and the different regions. I would be very, very interested in finding out about that and learning more about those kind of local contexts. I want to extend an invitation also. Everybody's welcome to join the Environmental Physiotherapy Association, of course. There are no costs involved at all. We're just looking to get people together to help and together understand the possibilities of what we can do here. And in the same way, anybody who feels like this is something that should be included into present and future physiotherapy education, please have a look at the EPT Agenda 2023 and sign individually. And like I said, hopefully we can take up some conversation with the IAP and the Women's Cell about maybe adding those as supporting organizations. And hopefully also we can add some universities and schools in India to this project that will help us integrate these aspects, the local aspects also, into education and share this with people around the world. So welcome and thank you, and extend an invitation in return, and welcoming everyone to what we do.
Definitely. Thank you, Doctor. Over to you, Dr. Palasha.
Thank you, Dr. Rashmi. It is my privilege to propose a vote of thanks for this occasion. Today, we have seen a new perspective. Environmental physiotherapy is an emerging new branch of physiotherapy for the betterment of the world and ourselves. It is a topic which is barely discussed, but is most important. We are enlightened by you, Dr. Filip. Thank you for bringing this awareness today. I, on behalf of IAP Women's Cell Goa India team, extend a very hearty vote of thanks to Dr. Filip Maric for gracing the webinar with your important work and sharing with us your findings and opinions today. Lastly, the entire team of IAP Women's Cell Goa India thanks the participants who attended this webinar eagerly. And once again, a big thank you to Dr. Filip to come to this webinar at a very short notice and making this a wonderful interactive session with us. Thank you. We hope that this movement is carried out successfully with the Agenda 2023 becoming popular in India and worldwide. I hope all institutions implement this ideology at the earliest. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Palasha. Thank you, Dr. Philip, and the whole team of IAPWC for organizing it. And last but not least, all our attendees, without whom we would today not reach like a 12K mark. So our YouTube channel is having 12,000 subscribers, and we are very happy to announce it now. So thank you very much, all of you, for your time on this Sunday afternoon. And please have a wonderful weekend ahead.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.